RJ Harvey is the fastest back at the Senior Bowl this year, but can he move his way into the first round?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me as he does every week is my good friend, Jake Crane from Crane & Co. over at the Daily Wire. Jake, UCF's schedule is out. We now know the win for each game for UCF. They open up the season at North Carolina A&T, but there's some intriguing matchups on this schedule that I want to talk about over the last half. You know, looking at this schedule is pretty manageable. You end with BYU, who was a fringe playoff contender this year. You taking over or under 6 wins in Scott Frost's first year as UCF's head coach?
I'm gonna have to take. You said it's over 6.5 or 5.5?
Over 5.5.
All right, so let's go through this experiment.
Right.
Jacksonville State lost their head coach. I'll give you a win on that one at home. North Carolina A&T at home. I'll give you that one. North Carolina at home. That's a big one. Bill Belichick's first year. I'll give you a win on that one. On the road at Kansas State, it's going to be a loss for me. 3-1. Kansas at home. It's going to be a loss for me. 3-2. On the road at Cincinnati. I know with Satterfield over there, it's kind of gone back and forth. I'm going to give you a loss there, 3-4. I think you beat West Virginia at home. Rich Rod's first year, 4-4. Baylor on the road. I'm going to give you a loss there. Houston at home. I'm going to give you a win there. I believe that's 5, right?
Yep.
At Texas Tech, I'm going to give you a loss there. Big Joey McGuire guy. Sorry, fans out there, UCF fans out there. Oklahoma State at home. Now, the funny part is typically when Oklahoma State's supposed to do good, they never do. When they're supposed to do bad, they always do good. But I'll give you a win there. Give me 6-6 in the first year at Scott Frost, losing on the road at BYU to close it up. With that schedule, year one, him trying to get the band back together, get the culture right. I mean, you'd hit your over mark on wins out of Vegas. So give me the over 6-6.
Okay, so over at 6-6. I think a lot of people feel like that's going to be a good year for Scott Frost in year one. I kind of feel like coming off a 4-win season, which Gus produced last year, 6 wins should be the floor. Doing worse than that, it would feel like a letdown, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you win 4 or less with this schedule, I mean, there probably was a couple disasters in there somewhere, and even though it's year one, everybody kind of understands, what that means. But with the transfer portal now, and we see what, Deion's been able to do with the transfer portal. You see what Lane Kiffin, you see Signetti, what he was able to do at Indiana year one. People are kind of starting to abandon it's going to take some time, even though, look, circumstances dictate results. Some years the transfer portal, you can do things like that. Sometimes it's not heavy enough to make that big of a jump. So I would say 5-7 would be about the bottom of, okay, it's year one. We understand. 6-6. Okay. All right. Let's get in a bowl game. Let's get some momentum and build off it from there. You go back to 4-8. That smells like trouble.
Yeah, I'll die on this hill, Jake. There are not a lot of teams in the Big 12 that don't have enough talent to win 6 games. Looking at how they begin this schedule, the non-conference is really manageable. Jacksonville State, North Carolina A&T. Again, we'll talk about it later in this show, but you're giving them the win at North Carolina versus the Super Bowl winning Bill Belichick.
Yeah, I think that game's at home, though, right? North Carolina's at home.
Yeah,
I think
it's
you get the first
game.
3 games at home. Okay.
But you've got a bye week in there, and that's where I want to go next. The bye weeks. We're now in an era of college football where there are 2 bye weeks in the major conferences. You've got a bye week after 2 cream puffs. Do you like that bye week there before North Carolina? Or do you feel like, and you've coached this, it would be better to just flow straight into that game when you're riding a high rather than having to take that week off?
Well, I always wanted the bye weeks before a big game. right? I wanted that extra week of prep, especially if the team you're playing doesn't have a bye week and they've got to play. And it's so early in the year, you can be playing good, but it's not like, you're hitting your peak week 10 or week 9 and you got some big games coming up and you really don't want to stall that momentum. You may have some injuries early and some guys coming back and you want them to be ready for that big game. Again, most coaches don't want a bye week going into playing a cream puff, because you feel like, not that you wasted it, but if you're going to scout 2 games ahead, it's hard to show that in practice, as opposed to saying, hey guys, in 2 weeks we got North Carolina. We're going to get an extra game of tape on them, depending on where their bye weeks fall. I always wanted a bye week going into a big opponent, be rested up, kind of get that extra week of scout, because it does give you an advantage.
For our listeners here on pod, North Carolina has no bye week before they play UCF. So they begin their season with TCU September 1st. They've got the Charlotte 49ers, the Richmond Spiders, and then UCF will be their first Power 5 game. So again, no rest for them right before this game. And then you've got the second bye week here, Jake, which comes on October 25th, sandwiched between West Virginia, which is homecoming, and Baylor. What do you think about an October bye week and then having to finish the season with 5 straight games?
Well, whether you're finishing with 5 or whether you're finishing with 4, I mean, I really don't mind it. Looking at it, I think UCF got a pretty good draw with the bye weeks. And, the bye week after the West Virginia game comes before you play a game on the road, which, I think is an advantage, just because, you'd rather have to play your bye week on the road. I'd rather play my bye week or the game after my bye week on the road against a somewhat quality team than at home against a cream puff like a North Carolina A&T. So I think that they're daggum near perfect. And you get done with that bye week. You play Baylor, you play Houston, you play Texas Tech, you play Oklahoma State, you play BYU. You may be playing your best ball there at the end. And by that point, if you had injuries early in the year, guys are either back or you found a replacement that's gotten some reps. So I think it's about perfect, man.
Yeah, looking at the schedule here, quick glance. If you're UCF, it looks like BYU is the only team on their schedule that would have finished the year ranked. You dodge Colorado on this schedule, and you dodge Iowa State. So now you've got Kansas State on this schedule September 27th. Yeah, but I feel like this is a pretty favorable draw here for Scott Frost in year one. It's very manageable. And if we were to pick the over, this schedule is a little bit of a blessing in your return to Orlando.
No, without a doubt. And look, I mean, again, no schedule is going to be easy when you play in a power conference. I hate when people say that. Oh, well, they've got an easy schedule in this league. There are no easy schedules. You have lighter schedules and you have heavier schedules. At some point in the schedule, it's going to suck. Like that's just the way it works. And even in a 12-game regular season in football, as opposed to college basketball, which it's like there's multiple points where it absolutely is terrible. But as far as who got the most favorable schedule, I mean, I think UCF's in that top tier, because I always look at the first thing you look at is the home and away, right? You look at non-conference and you look at home and away. Well, non-conference, I mean, I got a lot of respect for North Carolina, but you're catching them in year one under Belichick and you get them at home. That's a pretty favorable 3 non-conference. I mean, Jacksonville State, North Carolina A&T, and then North Carolina. And then you mentioned they have that bye week before there. So then you get into the meat of the schedule. Going to Kansas State, it's going to be tough, right? Going to Cincinnati, I think if I had to pick teams in the Big 12 that I would have to want to go to, Cincinnati would be one of them. Baylor would be another one. Texas Tech, it's going to be tough with Joey McGuire, as I mentioned. BYU on the road, we know how hard that is. But you get Oklahoma State at home. You get West Virginia at home, which, I know Garrett Green's gone. They lost some pieces there. You get Kansas at home. We'll see with them with Lance Leipold, a guy I got a lot of respect for. So I think if you had to pick some of the lighter schedules in the Big 12, UCF definitely got one.
I agree with you there. And I agree with the sentiment that, hey, you got the easy conference schedule. Look, man, there are tough games every year. Obviously, there are more favorable draws. We think UCF got one of those.
I mean, Mike, and to be honest with you, with the way the Big 12 went last year, hell, this could end up being the hardest schedule. I mean, who knows? I mean, Like, who has any idea? Like, nobody has any idea. Cincinnati could be world beaters. After what I saw last year, nothing is off the table in the Big 12.
Yeah, the team to pick to finish first finished almost last, and the team to finish last won the whole thing and made the playoff.
It was the upside down, man. It was a Stranger Things episode.
Indeed. But look, a bright spot for UCF last year was RJ Harvey. He was at the Senior Bowl. We're going to talk about what he was able to do right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert or a comedy show or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache, but with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, and you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. And the best part, you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Jake, RJ Harvey was at the Senior Bowl, and he was the fastest guy there. Reports out of this thing, man, are that RJ Harvey is showing off some special abilities down there. I had this conversation with my guy, Andrew Glucko from The Last Word on Sports. He didn't feel like RJ Harvey was a first-round back. Now, in today's game, running backs aren't really going at a premium in the draft, but every once in a while, we get a surprise. It's running back by committee at both levels of football. Now, what do you think about RJ Harvey, man, making waves at the Senior Bowl and possibly working himself into the first round?
Well, look, if you're going to go and be the fastest guy at either the Senior Bowl or the NFL Combine, that equals dollar signs.
Yep.
They'll look past multiple things. And RJ Harvey, I know he measured it at a little under 5'8". At the Senior Bowl, but he is 207 pounds. So, it's not like he's a, stick figure back there that they're going to turn into Mr. Potato Head the first time they hit him, and they'll be picking up ears and eyebrows and all type of stuff all over the field. He's got a low center of gravity. Again, I think he's a guy in the NFL, the way it's played now. Not that he's Jahmyr Gibbs, because he's not, but people are finding ways to use these guys. Even looking at Xavier Worthy, right, who ran that time at the Combine, his stock shot up. Not that it was down, but it shot up even more, and we see what he's doing with the Chiefs. If you are super fast, they will make an excuse to draft you early. They will reach on you because you can be big. That's great. That's amazing. But if you can't, you can be as big as you want to be, and if you can't catch them, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. So somebody's going to take a flyer on him. Will it be in the first round? I don't know. This really helps his chances. Again, the Senior Bowl is the mecca, of padded, developmental practices because the Combine's not padded. And shout out to my guy, Jim Nagy down there in Mobile, does an amazing job. But when you look at RJ Harvey and his ability, catch the ball out of the backfield, I think the one thing you worry about with a smaller back like that is obviously pass protection.
Yeah.
Right. Finding ways to be able where he comes in the game where your tendencies aren't through the roof, right? Where you're like, all right, well, they're probably not throwing it, or if they're throwing it to him, or he's going to get out in a route if they do throw it, because you're trying to eliminate tendencies. And that's been one of the toughest things about these NFL teams that use multiple backs, and they call them situational backs. Well, if you get in there and it's the same situation every time, and you basically do the same thing, your tendencies are going to be through the roof, and I'm going to adjust to it defensively. But you can never think your stock is going down when you are the fastest at the Senior Bowl or the Combine. That's really not how that works.
You've been to the Senior Bowl a lot. The running backs have what they call an on-field athleticism score. RJ Harvey was the top back with a score of 85.26. Behind him was a guy you and I both know very well. Jarquez Hunter had a score of 83.49. Trevor Etienne of Georgia, 78.87. LaQuint Allen of Syracuse, 68.51. Those were your top four in that athleticism category. How much does this mean? I know the scouts are down there, but, similar to the Combine, how much can a player really improve his stock performing at things like the Senior Bowl? Is it just for show, or can you make significant moves in the minds of the people who are making the decisions to invest millions of dollars into athletes?
Oh, it's the best way to move up for a couple reasons. One, you're going against the best. So the level of competition is not in question, regardless of where you came from. If you can play, you can play. If you got an invite to that game, you obviously did something. The second thing is recency bias. It's one of the last things they're going to see. They're going to watch all the tape on you from your freshman to your senior year, and now you can be a junior and go to the Senior Bowl. But the last thing that they will see in person, right, they could have gone to games your junior year or your senior year, is you balling out against the best competition in college football, you balling out against the class that is going with you to the NFL. So, look, I think it's more valuable than the NFL Combine. I really believe that because the practices are padded. Now, the game so much, it's kind of like the spring game. It's really not nearly as important as the practices are. So I think you make your moves in practice. We've seen guys absolutely shoot up the charts. We've seen guys fall off the charts at the Senior Bowl. So I think it is the best way. That's why I always encourage guys. And it's funny, my dad played in the Senior Bowl, was a projected second-round pick, and tore his ACL on a sprinkler head and dropped to the late third, early fourth. I can't remember off the top of my head. But look, you can get hurt walking down the steps. You can get hurt walking your dog. I think it is the best way to raise your draft status.
You raise an interesting point about the Senior Bowl versus something like the NFL Combine. Senior Bowl is padded. You're actually competing in a lot of ways down at the Senior Bowl. Whereas at the NFL Combine, we're seeing a lot of guys make business decisions to skip that thing, trying not to hurt their stock at the Combine. Is this lessening the importance of going to the Combine?
Well, I think it depends on, what circumstance you are. Are you a guy that, is kind of coming out of nowhere that needs to continue making a name for himself? Or if you're going to be pretty much a surefire top 10 pick or a surefire first round pick, is it worth it going down there? Could you only hurt yourself? I think it just depends on who you are, where you're from, and how they look at you and where you stand at that moment. And you make a smart business decision off that. I'll never look down on a guy for not going to the Combine or whatever, because again, he's looking at the numbers. He's talking with his agent. They're not going to make a decision that puts him in a bad spot. Now, some guys need to go prove it. Like if you're RJ Harvey, you need to go run fast at the Combine, right? You need to do well on the bench press at the Combine. You need to have a good shuttle if you're trying to move up there, not only in the first round, but try and move up maybe toward the, second tier of the first round and get your name called early. So a lot of it depends on circumstance. Like if I'm Cam Ward, I don't need to go to the Combine. Like I don't need to do that. Yeah, I'll have a pro day, but like there's no reason for me to do that. So a lot of it just depends on your circumstance.
Interesting stuff here. Looking forward to seeing what RJ Harvey can do. We talked about the schedule, though, in the first half, and you touched on it. We get a chance to see Scott Frost versus Bill Belichick. Box office stuff, I think it's going to be. We'll talk about what this game means for UCF in 2025 after this break. Jake, Bill Belichick is coaching college football. It seems like he's going to try his hand at this. He's going to get the control that he is used to. Now, he's one of a few coaches that got to be coach and GM at the NFL level. In college, you're coaching GM, man. You run this thing. If you're Scott Frost, how big of an opportunity is this to log a coach against a win against a Super Bowl winner?
Well, I think it's huge. I think it's the perfect storm for Central Florida. Not that Scott Frost isn't a big name, but I mean, everybody in here, let's look at each other and be honest. Like he ain't Belichick. But what you do is you get Belichick in his first year in new territory in college. We don't know how that's going to go with a roster that is ever changing, right? That is new, with players that are having to get used to him. I know Scott Frost is new, but he's been there before and he's been in the college game, and you get him at home. And a win over Bill Belichick, regardless of how North Carolina finishes the season, is an instant hype machine for UCF if you're able to win it. It is a great springboard because you can beat Jacksonville State, people will clap. You can beat North Carolina A&T, 2 people will clap. You beat North Carolina with Bill Belichick week 3, people start looking around going, okay, well, maybe this UCF team is for real this quickly under Scott Frost, or here we go again with Scott Frost turning UCF up. And then if you go to Kansas State and you lose, well, you beat Bill Belichick at home the week before. Then you get Kansas at home that next week, which isn't going to be easy, but it's another kind of hype win. But I think this is actually, I don't know if UCF could have picked a better non-conference Power 5 team to play at home week 3, prove it to me early, than a Bill Belichick-led North Carolina. I think this is a perfect springboard opportunity for UCF to kind of get those, to use a term from your mascot, to get the sword sharp again.
Yeah, I think that this is a unique opportunity if you're UCF. The hype machine, the media train is going to be around that program at least in year one, whether you like it or not. And they're going to be following the eyes of the media are going to be following Bill Belichick. So if you can log a win, I think it brings some positive attention to your program. Now you're going in, you're in the Big 12 now. You're officially in the Big 12. You played in this thing a couple of years, and you've got to start to establish yourself as a force in the conference. Now, we saw Arizona State make some moves in that direction this past year, winning the whole thing after being picked to finish last. If you're Scott Frost, I think this moves the needle in the right direction. What do you think here? What kind of game is UCF going to have on their hands versus a Bill Belichick-led team? Is it going to be a low, grinded out game? Are they going to have to play some real defense here?
Yeah, look, I think Bill Belichick is, at the end of the day, he's a defensive guy. I think you're going to get a pro-style offense. I think there's going to be a lot of NFL analytical elements to it. I don't think you're going to get a bunch of craziness. You're probably going to get a decent amount of 11 personnel. Defensively, I think they're going to be complex. What I worry about for North Carolina is, are they going to be too complex? And the thing I like about Scott Frost and what he does offensively is that you don't have to be complex to be effective. And I think we talked about this before. Just because you can do so many things or have so many calls for things or checks for things doesn't mean it's going to be great. As simple as what some of these RPO teams do, or teams that have that element, you're affecting 3 different levels at once with really simplicity. The hardest part is making the read in action while the play is going, as opposed to being like, all right, so he's going to do this and then he's got to do that. But if he does that, then he does this. And if they both do that, well, then I got to check to this and that. Sometimes that can lock guys up, not just on offense, but defense too. So if I'm Scott Frost, sometimes the best way to beat complexity is with simplicity. And, that's not a sexy thing to say. It's not, you look at the play call and it's a lot shorter for what Scott Frost does than what Bill Belichick's going to have on offense. So I actually think it could be an advantage, that the style and the system that Scott Frost runs compared to something that is NFL complex, because don't forget, speaking of complex, all you do in the NFL is stay in the complex. You do football. There's no class. Like there's nothing on the periphery. You show up in that building at 5:30 in the morning and it's all football. You don't have to worry about, what Becky's doing after, she gets done with Spanish 101 or whatever. Like, it's football. Guess what? And you have time to install all these things and go over it and go over it and go over it, as opposed to college, where you've really got to manufacture time. You've really got to be unbelievably efficient with the time that you have, which I don't know. Does Bill Belichick already realize that? Part of me thinks no. He's going to try and do it the way he's always done it, and may just get frustrated, which I think could be an advantage for Scott Frost.
Agreed. Look, Scott Frost he understands the job. He understands the assignment, and he knows winning games like this come with the territory. So while reasonable expectations in year one are warranted, in today's college football with the portal and with NIL, Jake, people expect faster turnarounds, not necessarily quick turnarounds, but faster turnarounds than we've seen. I still think the way to build it is from high school if you want to build a sustained winner, but showing that you can win these sorts of games will help you in that regard, both in high school recruiting and in the portal. Jake, I want to thank you for joining me today, man, here on Locked On UCF. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, man, really easy. If you watch your sports shows, we do one called Crane and Company, CRAIN and Company. We go live each weekday at 2 p.m. Central. If you can't catch us live, it stays on there on demand. We're live streaming the Super Bowl this Sunday. Come hang out with us. And yeah, if you like this show, you're probably going to like ours.
Guys, thank you for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out our friends at Locked On Big 12. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12, including the UCF Knights. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.